wrong. The witch is dead. But before we get into any of that, I do want to go ahead and introduce both of my co-hosts. Biminem, how you doing?
Doing good.
All right, that is unfortunate, but we'll take it. And also, Gail, how are you doing?
Unfortunate.
Oh, okay. Well, that's better. That's a slight improvement. But we do have a very, very focused topic today. And as you can see from the card that is in the back, that is this time not Niall Sylvain, Nadu Winged Wisdom, and also Grief, that one as well, have been banned from Modern. There's a couple other bans as well, some Pioneer bans that I don't have as much to talk about because, unfortunately, in our local meta, the only people we've been able to practice Pioneer against have been ourselves. So we haven't had as much experience with that, or at least I haven't had as much experience with Amalia or Sorin being huge issues for Pioneer. But we have had experience with Nadu. So I want to go ahead and first, before we get into anything else, on Nadu, Biminem, what are your thoughts on this fun bird?
I'm fortunate that I didn't see a single game of Modern against him.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the tournaments I played in, the people weren't running it. Because, a community is always going to be 50-50. It's going to be people that are not a full split 50-50, but the people that like it and the people that hate it. Luckily, everyone I faced in the tournaments was the people that hated Nadu. So
we did have one. I thought we had one Nadu player there.
The only time I've played against Nadu thus far in a game of Magic the Gathering has been at the Casual Commander tournament, where,
where he doesn't belong.
That kind of, it's an individual the three of us are all familiar with, but I'm not going to name drop. That was, I had to get onto that individual, but that was the only time.
It's one of those fun situations where you're like, all right, so I got a question. What kind of game are you trying to have? You trying to have a fun game where everybody gets to enjoy themselves, or are you trying to only win? It's like if you're.
I told him exactly what was going to happen before the game started because I guess he had just built it or something, and I was like, "You do know how this is going to go, right?" He's like, "No, it's not going to do that." It proceeds to exactly do the thing that I said, and I was like, "See, it did that."
That's like
I forget what response he had, but he doesn't play to the casual anymore.
There was somebody who played a Cody deck at one point, and I remember having a similar conversation where I'm like, I don't think I've seen a non-degenerate Cody deck, but let's see what yours is. I'll give it a chance. And then it proceeded to be, let me fast mana into a turn 3 Demonic Consultation Thassa's combo. And I'm like, at that point, why are you playing Cody? Like, what fun things are you trying to get out of Cody that you couldn't grab in any other shape if all you're doing is Demcon Thasses? Like, that's... Okay, sure. That's...
Don't like 5-color commander who says you can't cast permanents?
Ugh. It is what it is. But, that said, complaints about Nadu and Commander aside... Most of my experience with Nadu has been in Commander as well, but I've been watching a lot of stuff on Nadu in Modern and having to try to theory craft a way around Nadu in Modern. And the problem that I think you also ran into a lot, was that when you're theory crafting around Nadu, nothing comes up. There's nothing that actually counters him. There's nothing that stops him in the Modern format that also would not directly punish you in other matchups, right? Like the opportunity cost to sink in so many resources to deal with specifically Nadu generates bad matchups with every other deck. It generates bad matchups against Ruby Storm and Tron, who need a different set of interaction entirely to what you deal with when it comes to Nadu. But Gail, you tend to follow a lot of this stuff far more closely than either me or Biminem do, so I want to hear your thoughts as well.
So fun fact, I actually built a Nadu deck.
So the unnamed individual is at the table. Let's go.
Yeah. So I built it. I played it for exactly one game, realized how stupid it was, and then took it apart immediately afterwards. So yeah, I knew that something had to go. Nadu just absolutely...
Oh boy, thanks OBS Studio for reminding me that connection is an issue. But, I had the feeling that we were going to lose Shuko before we
Yeah.
lost Nadu. But
See,
I'm glad that didn't happen.
Speaking
I
of,
would have, it would have had to happen in one of the previous ban lists for that, because that's what happened with Hogak. Was like Hogak became a huge deck like almost immediately, and then like in the first ban list afterwards, they're like, all right, let's ban Bridge from Below.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, let's ban Faithless Looting. And it still didn't work. Okay.
Finally, let's ban Hogak.
speaking of Shuko, though, I'm gonna look up the prices real quick, but I can't imagine the people that bought up a bunch of them to try to sell them at high prices are happy right now.
No, I don't think they are. So the people who profited from Nadu the most, aside from Wizards of the Coast, are the people who had Shukos in their bulk and found all of their bulk Shukos from Kamigawa, who, by the way, if you're looking for those bulk Shukos, you could do me a huge favor and find me a used to be equally bulk Ashes of the Fallen, because I still need that for my boyfriend deck. But look, I don't like just ordering a card online if I can help it. I like finding it at a card shop. I like finding it in a trade. I like having a memory attached to it. That's really important to me. Which is why I've literally gone across the country looking for an Ashes of the Fallen without any actual ability to find one. I went to many card shops between here and New York City and didn't find any.
Interject. You use Driver Booster. This is a complete off topic, but my computer's about to blink itself. I didn't move my mouse for, I guess, like a minute or so. Driver Boost is about to try to update my graphics card on me.
Oh, okay.
And it forces itself, and I don't know how to stop that. Do you know how to stop that?
Nope. No idea how to stop it.
All right. Good shit.
Everything's about to go sideways for you. That's fine.
Computer's just going to shit itself for a minute.
Yep. Jasso says, does WotC design new cards to profit off of bulk? No. We actually understand. So they're actually fairly transparent about the Fire design process. There is no part of it that is built to profit off of bulk because they can't profit off of bulk. They don't have a way to sell the cards directly that is not secret layers. So if they designed new cards to profit off of bulk, then what we would see is Nadu came out, and then as a result, a secret layer with Shuko would come out. The Disa deck came out, and then a secret layer with Ashes of the Fallen would come out. That doesn't really happen. If they end up, like, a year later, reprinting that bulk, and that bulk ends up getting a lower price as a result, that's entirely a response to the community. But no, I'm cynical about WotC, but I'm not so cynical to think that they look at the 30,000 cards they've designed in the last 30 years and go, yes, good. If we print this card, all the Shuko stock will increase. Once that happens, we've taken over the world. I don't think they're doing that, right?
I support the people that found their Shukos in bulk and sold them. I do. You had this card in bulk. You got it when it fell out of pack as chaff, and then you sold it when other people that were trying to build a degenerate deck wanted to pay you
100%. 100%.
Everyone that found the Shukos in bulk and sold them, hats off to you. Everyone that tried to buy and sell them or hold on to them to try to be an MTG finance bro, haha, get bent.
Yeah, I think that the Shuko stock prices is a stupid thing.
The thing I like the most is actually not the Shuko price, it's the Nadu price. Because remember, the Nadu was like $20 at one point.
Yeah, now he's sitting at $3.
Like about a month ago, you could get them for like $5.
Well, because everybody knew what was going to happen, right? Like, we all understood this bird was going to go.
His downtrend started well before the ban.
Speaking of that, you know who else had to go, though, for Modern's health? And I saw some conversation about this on Twitter that I'll get into here in a bit. But, this had to go to Grief is gone as well. And
I want to go back to the video where we talked about Fury being banned.
Yeah.
And I want to say that
You were right.
Was right.
So I saw a couple people complaining about Grief getting banned on Twitter, and I want to address those people. Obviously, not by name, because that would be dumb and very, very petty. I just have a difference of opinion than them. My difference of opinion, the opinion that I saw a lot was, well, what decks were even running Grief now? Like, what? Grief stopped being a problem. They should have banned Grief a year ago. Why ban it now when it's not a relevant card in the meta compared to what it was? To those people, I would like to say no. This funny thing happens when you ban the powerhouse of a meta, say Nadu. When you ban the powerhouse of the meta, there are decks and cards that come to fill that power vacuum. Now, in Nadu's case, there will be nothing filling the power vacuum for Nadu decks. Like, those will be gone. Their percentage yield in the meta will be taken away, and other decks will come in to place instead. Now, what decks were consistently top of the meta before Nadu? Directly before Nadu, it was Domain, right? Domain was one of the biggest things on the block because we got Leyline of the Guild Pact. But prior to that, and even around Domain, was scam decks. This is why Fury got banned, because Fury was far too much for scam decks, and Fury made it impossible to design cards with 1 or 2 toughness later in the future of Magic the Gathering. Grief, on the other hand, well, let me paint you a scenario. You're playing competitive and you mulligan down to 6. You recognize that your hand isn't the greatest, but you understand that you may as well take it. You've got 1 or 2 cards you can play, and that's all you really need. You're okay. You don't have to mull further. Then the opponent goes, I evoke Grief. I exile a black card from my hand. Say I exile a Feign Death. Grief goes away, and then they cast Feign Death, or Malakir Rebirth, or any of the billions of cards that do the exact same effect on the Grief. Now, the 1 or 2 cards that you kept from your mulligan are gone. It's not that you're on the back foot. You now have an impossible game. You cannot win. The reason that decks like Nadu were able to get around this problem was Nadu has such a density of bullshit. All they have to do is have the Urza's Saga and then draw into the Nadu eventually. That's all they need to have. Whereas other decks need to have extra pieces. If you snipe out multiple cards away from most decks in Modern right now, they kind of just fold, especially after 1 or 2 mulligans. It creates a really toxic environment where people are having to keep bad hands again in order to compensate for Grief existing. And the whole reason that we even got the London Mulligan in Magic to begin with was to circumvent this problem. If play design creates a card that creates the problem that they had just solved by giving us a different mulligan system, that's a problem. And yes, it's been a problem since Grief came out, since scam decks became as prevalent in the meta as they have been. But I think it's entirely naive to believe that those same scam decks would not make a resurgence with the Nadu power vacuum being what it is. That's my take on it anyway, for anybody who's wondering why the card that wasn't as represented as it should be is gone. That's my take.
Okay, so I would like to give my opinion. This is basically when you have a card such as Grief, where it's extremely difficult to play around, because let me put it this way. You go, I'm gonna evoke a Grief. I get to look at your hand first. Then I get to determine if I'm gonna Feign Death or not.
Yep.
Because so if you had, let's say, a lightning bolt in your hand, I can just be like, okay, I'm gonna take the lightning bolt, and then I get to take another card. All right. If you had, let's say, 2 lightning bolts, I can just say I'm not gonna cast it. And now I know I can take a lightning bolt and just not cast a Feign Death, because it would you would just get a 2-for-1, right?
Or even better, you do the Grief, you Feign Death it and get rid of everything except the lightning bolt, leaving them with only the lightning bolt to cast. They kill the Grief, now they got lands in hand.
Exactly. That's another way. It just, bro, even if you had the right answer for it, it existing put you so far behind that it made so many games just non-games. Because I'm gonna go on a brief tangent here because I'm pretty much the only person who talks about Legacy.
By all means.
So in Legacy, grief was exactly the same issue, except for there was no killing the grief because the only card that you played that could kill a grief on turn one. Well, number one, if they went first, you just had nothing. Number two, if you went first, you had Swords to Plowshares.
Yep.
That was it because they played it in Grief in Riskaminator, which is just Reanimator plus Scam in Legacy. I have a funny story about that.
Well,
But
say the story.
so if you look up
There was a
before
pause there.
I was correcting myself. Shut up. I was sitting up. If before the ban, if you looked up the top cards used in Legacy, it was just a whole Demir Riskaminator deck. Like the top cards in like the whole format was just one deck. Like that's how bad it was in Legacy. How bad, and it was all off the fact that you didn't have to immediately cast a spell on the grief to get it back. You could just grief them, take a card out of their hand, and then either next turn or the same turn, if it's the card reanimate, you can just reanimate it from the graveyard and take another card.
Yay!
And then you can leave your opponent with Force of Will blue card and just make them have to 2-for-1 themselves in order to do anything.
It's great. It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the worst part is, if you Force of Will the grief, they just reanimated it anyway, and you just went down 3 cards for nothing.
This is also the reason that what's his face? This is one of the reasons why like Ragavan was taken out of Legacy. Because when you drop Ragavan down and someone went, oh, you played the monkey for 1. Let's go ahead and bolt the monkey. You just responded with days. And you're like, now my advantage engine is online and your consent isn't part of the conundrum.
Yep.
Like, it was... Modern Horizons is the gift that keeps on giving. In terms of, oops, we made a design mistake. Oops, we have a problem. Oops, we did a big owie. Oops, like Hogak's Modern Horizons 1, right?
Yes.
So Hogak's Modern Horizons 1, that had to go for Modern. Modern Horizons 2
had Grief and Fury.
Had Grief and Fury. Grief and Fury are now gone. Modern Horizons 3 had Nadu. I'm starting to think that there's a problem with the design process of these sets. Almost like they're being designed too quickly and with not a lot of oversight. Like, you know, what you would expect from a company that had a lot of layoffs and then also happened to have a doubling of product releases.
Yeah.
This is what you can kind of expect. And we'll get into that a little bit. That's my conspiracy theory tinfoil hat, but there's actually an article going into the design process of Nadu that we'll get into here in a bit that's written by Michael Majors, who was one of the designers for MH3. But continue, Gale.
I will say that just the fact that designing cards for Modern has turned out to be not the greatest thing, because I think there might be 1 or 2 cards from all of the Modern Horizon sets that are actually cool and that I like. Otherwise, they're all either broken, degenerate things like Grief and Hogak and Nadu, or they're just awful. Like, none of the cards from Modern Horizons, like, I'm trying to think of a card that's from Modern Horizons that I actually, well, this Dragon Race Channeler, right?
Yeah. But even Darcy was just power creeping a previous blue version of that. Like that, like, we already had that effect. It just wasn't as effective.
And
Ragavan.
I don't like Ragavan. I think in a world where, well, I don't care about Ragavan because in my control decks I always play Lightning Bolt. Go figure.
So Cirrus and I have been running into this ongoing gag with a friend of ours. You know him as well. Ragavan in his deck is the worst card for him because it only ever makes his opponents win. He has a consistent 100% return rating of being shat on by his own monkey. It's phenomenal.
So I was playing Scales against him, and consistently in our games, if Ragavan made contact with my face, he would get rid of the land from the top of my deck, which, if you've played Scales, you know I only need 2 lands. The deck does not need a high amount of lands to function. He kept removing dead lands on the top of my deck and then handing me copies of Ozolith or copies of Zabaz or an Arcbound Ravager.
Oh, no.
It was... It was consistently perfect. Obviously I recognize that this is not something to judge a card on, right? Because variance is variance. It's going to do that. And milling is nothing but psychic damage. It doesn't matter if your best cards went to the graveyard when you got milled. You didn't have them in your hand. You didn't have them to begin with. I recognize all of that theory crafting around milling and yanking from the top strategies. But it is just incredibly funny to me.
Because it happens to him so often.
It happens every time. I've watched him simultaneously say, Dimir Murktide isn't the right way to go. And also, I hate my Ragavan. I'm going to take it out of my deck. It keeps screwing me. I keep hearing these 2 statements.
He literally Ragavanned a land off the top of my deck so that my Kavu could then get my Tribal Flames.
Nice.
It was perfect.
He's like, I gave you that. I was like, yeah, you did.
Like, it was just kind of nutty the amount of times that happened. And I recognize that that's not, like, again, that's not something to judge a card on, right? You can't judge a card on that. But because I personally hate the monkey, I really, really hate the monkey.
I don't think any of us hate the monkey as much as him, though. The guy who had the
I'm glad that the player having the worst time with Ragavan right now isn't the player playing against Ragavan.
But he, in all earnest, he despises the monkey. He just can't find a better card to go in that slot.
Like, honestly, for that slot, he already has Tamiyo. So he's running what? Tamiyo, Darcy, Ragavan.
Yeah, because he's Murktide.
Because he's Murktide. So Tamiyo, Darcy, Ragavan are his 1-drops. I mean, he could always go old school and, have a little mad scientist that flips into a 3/2 insect. That's an option, but I don't think that option's better than Ragavan, right?
You could
just play Monster Whisperer and go aggro.
Or Monster Whisperer.
Monstrous Whisperer, Ledger Shredder wouldn't be bad, but the problem with Ledger Shredder is that it doesn't fill the 1-drop role. Because you can't 1-drop it.
Right, but the 1-drop is only really relevant on turn 1 specifically. And when you're spending when you're spending 2 mana on him, he's haste. So Ragavan can hit on turn 2, whether you cast him turn 1 or turn 2. He's most of the time going to end up being a 2-drop.
So the thing about it is that it's actually more relevant on turn 3 than on turn 1. Because on turn 3 you can dash him and play a 1-drop.
Also, the thing with Ragavan, it's not just that he comes down super early. He fills a role that other cards cannot. The role that he fills more than anything is treasure and utility.
The treasure is the best part.
Like, being able to constantly get that treasure. It's one of the reasons why Tamiyo is used in the deck now, too. Because Tamiyo comes down, punches you for 0, they get the clue, and now, irrespective of what happens in the next couple turns, if you start eating away their resources, which a Murktide deck runs out very quickly, they just start building them back up. Ragavan gives you the other side of that build back up. If they spend all of their mana on removal or whatever they have to in order to fill their graveyard for Murktide, they still have the mana left over because of Ragavan to use on counter spells to protect their board state. Because Murktide's really cool, but they still don't want you shocking their Darcy, right? Or bolting their Darcy.
Yeah, no, because he and I sat there for like an hour trying to find cards in the format that could fill that slot, and we couldn't find anything in the one drops. None of them were good.
It's
Yeah.
true because the one drops are usually either really good or really bad, or they're banned.
Yeah,
I
like
feel like Ledger Shredder would be a worthy upgrade from that slot.
like the only card he possibly could run in the one drop that fits the theme of the deck even mildly is like Goblin Guide. But the Goblin Guide's going to be doing the exact same thing in granting the opponent's random bullshit, and it's going to be even worse than the Ragavan.
Yeah, the Ragavan doesn't give the opponent the land to play the spell that you just made them draw into.
Yeah, it's
Goblin Guide is pure downside to offset his mana cost to power toughness ratio.
Yep. So there is unfortunately for him specifically with his bad luck Brian mode, there is nothing that fits the bill quite like Ragavan. So Ragavan's price is going to keep on being what it is.
I want to run Siege Smash in something though. In modern.
I will say I am happy that there is a version of Ragavan now that is $27.
Which version?
The Modern Horizons 2 Time Shift. It's now $27. There is a way to get the monkey for less money than what people had been trying to get. So that's at least something.
For the Fury ban, well, I guess a little bit before people were thinking Fury was going to be banned, he dipped to somewhere around this price tag. Let's see.
Geez, the most expensive version of him is the Secret Lair
3,000.
Showdown version.
Yeah.
My
the
God.
market price is 3,000. The 5 listings start at 2,700.
When did that come out? Oh, Secret Lair Rise.
It was probably the secret card extra in the Secret Lair.
No, it was from you got it from the Secret Lair tournament. It was a tournament that gave you the Secret Lair Ragavan as the top 4 got one of them.
Oh, okay, so that's valid. Anytime it's like exclusive prize for you won a tournament, you were a good player, I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because that's a prize for the player who did well in that tournament. Like that's okay. That's fine.
Retro Border's the cheap one.
Yeah, which is I
don't hate the look of it.
Time Shift, I guess, is the official name they use for it now. But yeah, Retro Border.
Yeah.
So he is the monkey, and there's nothing quite like the monkey. I am glad his price is going down because I'm gonna be honest. God, I want more people to play Modern. I really do. Like I want more people to be able to play this game in something other than freaking Commander, which is not that I dislike Commander. It's just it's the only thing Wizards seems to care about because it's the only thing that they release product for anymore. Because, I'm sorry, Modern Horizons 3 was not a Modern product. It was not.
A lot of people do play Modern. It's just at our specific scene, it seems to be a little scarce. And I know what happened. Those couple shops that you and I both know off the top of our head that run quite large Modern tournaments on Friday nights, the people that were, coming up to the scene that we were at have since migrated to the larger tournament, as humans typically do.
Yeah.
So it was just absorbed by the other shop.
I just wish there was enough. So the ideal, though, is for there to be enough.
The biggest format,
Like, the ideal is for there to be enough players in the pool, though, that multiple shops that are... Because the one you're mentioning is an hour and 10 minutes away. Like, there should be a big enough pool of Modern players that on Friday nights, people are able to go to the more local shop to them instead of the one an hour away.
So I have my opinions, and I will.
I feel like they're taco opinions.
Yeah, there are taco opinions.
They're taco opinions.
Yeah, I think that most times there are enough people for it. It's just we have to get them all to come out.
We have to get them there. Because
they're on the same day.
I know
they're Friday.
I know of at least 8 Modern players there. At least not Modern players, but people who have Modern decks, because I think there is a distinction to be made there. Like, you may have the deck, but you don't go around playing the format a lot. At that point, I'm just going to say you have the deck. But I can think of 8 off the top of my head. Unfortunately, 4 of them include us and my girlfriend. So that's not exactly the position you want to be in when it comes to an FNM. You want to have more players available so that you don't feel like you have to be at your FNM or it doesn't fire. Because if the tournament doesn't fire enough times, then the FNM doesn't have a reason to support it, and then you feel like you're kind of held hostage, which is...
See, we got Ragavan dude, we got our old buddy, who we used to play at the house, not the one who owned the house, but the other guy. We got the nice guy who plays Burn. That's 7 of us.
And then the Nadu player, who technically now doesn't have... Oh, wait, no, sorry. No, he doesn't have a Nadu deck. I'm sorry, he has Dimir Murktide. I was incorrect.
Yeah, Dimir Murktide.
Nadu is one of his commander decks.
Got the deck on him, but the thing is, he works swing shift. He's every other week.
Yeah.
And he's always got the modern deck in his possession. When I was there Friday, I was like, I pointed at him. He was like, I mean, I got it with me, but he and I would have been a 2-man tournament.
Yeah, which is, again, not the situation you want to be in an LGS. I want the format to be cheap enough that more people can get in, because, like, especially when you think of, like, our Burn player that's there, Burn is the easiest onboard into Modern. It is the cheapest onboard in. There are cheaper ways in, but Burn is the cheapest to get, like, a meta deck, not something that's sitting in somewhere in the tier 3 area that functions but kind of not. Like, Burn is the cheapest way to do that. And unfortunately, even though Burn is the cheapest way to onboard people into Modern, you don't want a tournament that is like 90% Burn players. That is its own level of unfun for everybody. Especially when you've got a couple Tron players there that can just tell the Burn player that they don't get to play the game for 7 turns. So, which I guess that kind of brings us into our next conversation before we get into the Nadu article. The One Ring was not banned in Modern.
I don't hate that.
What I hate about it the most, more than anything, I'm going to put One Ring on the screen real quick so that everybody can... Why are none of these legible? Wizards, come on! The secret layer One Ring popped up first that wasn't legible. Or sorry, it was the Elvish One Ring that wasn't legible, and then the secret layer One Ring that wasn't legible. Like, okay, cool. That's not what I wanted, Wizards of the Coast. So real quick, I want to go ahead and read out for Modern what they said in regards to everything. So they pointed out that grief has been maligned as one of the least fun parts of competitive, but then the Wizards of the Coast specifically says, we certainly considered a few other cards to take action against in this announcement, namely the One Ring. While present in several decks, there is no clear the One Ring deck terrorizing Modern. Being a unique combination of self-protection and card advantage, it is strong, and is a strong card that helps prop up several varied strategies. Ultimately, we decided not to act against the One Ring. The possible problems it may be causing for Modern aren't as clear as Nadu and Grief. Once we see how the format evolves after this change, we will continue to observe and evaluate the health of Modern and see which future actions are necessary. So, I want to go ahead and respond to that, because that's from Wizards of the Coast. No. You've already told us once that the One Ring was being looked at, along with Orcish Bowmasters, but I think the One Ring is more egregious. The One Ring was being looked at as a potential problem that needed to be solved. And then, immediately, when you had an opportunity to get rid of it, and players were already pointing out, hey, the One Ring is starting to show up in so many decks, it's starting to become an auto-include in so many decks. That's the definition of a card you don't want to deal with. If it's an auto-include in everything.
In my domain deck.
Like, it's seeing play in Domain. There's versions of Affinity and Hardened Scales running One Ring. Tron is forced to run One Ring. In fact, Tron's worst matchup used to be Burn, and now that the One Ring is out, it's not. Because they can turn to the One Ring off of a couple of Ugin's Labyrinths, and then they can, as I said, they can One Ring you for 7 turns after that, because they're going to do the One Ring, and then they're going to Metalmorph or Semblance Anvil the thing, or Sculpting Steel the thing. They're going to keep on reusing the One Ring over and over again, and when they run out of One Rings in their deck, then they're going to grab them out of their sideboard, because that's what Karn does. Literally, the deck that is supposed to fold to aggro, it is a tempo deck. Its job is to create a tempo swing when the game hits a certain point. Doesn't have to do the tempo swing anymore. It just gets to sit behind the One Ring literally forever. I don't see how that's healthy. I don't see how that's fun. As somebody who plays against the One Ring in my practice sessions for Modern, it is not a fun experience. Tron used to be a deck that I didn't hate playing against, because if they got to their 7 mana and casted their big thing, that was on you. You should have disrupted that. Thanks to the One Ring, it doesn't matter if you disrupt it. It doesn't matter at all. The Tron deck just gets to go, here's the One Ring. Now I'm going to eat your lands with Summoning Micah Spawn. Now I'm going to go a little forward and drop this Ulamog on you like I normally would, like the good old days. Now you're dead. Like it's unfun. My problem with One Ring isn't just that it is strong. It's that I actively do not enjoy playing against the One Ring, and I'm playing a deck that has a unique advantage against the One Ring. Hardened Scales can Walking Ballista around the One Ring all day. Like, I have a mode where I can just slip past it. My problem isn't inability to deal with it. My problem is this card makes games fucking suck. Anyway, that's my rant.
Don't end the rant. I have to rant now.
Okay, cool. The rant continues.
But I hold the feather for my rant after that.
The One Ring has that issue where when you look at it, like the first time you play it, it feels really cool because you're like, oh, I get protection from everything. That's sick. And then like you play against it, and you're like, oh wait, that's protection from everything. Well, like and then you play against Tron, and Tron's like, yeah, I'm gonna play the One Ring for like 8 turns in a row.
Yep.
Good luck? Question mark. And
could you infect proliferate a Tron player who's behind the ring? Like, okay, let's say you got 1 infect counter on them before they started doing their One Ring into One Ring, right? So they have 1 on them. Could you start doing things that could proliferate, and can you choose them to put another counter on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can. However, the issue then becomes you have to play infect cards, and they're all bad.
Yeah, you have to have previously infected them, and the thing is, the infect deck does not proliferate. It's not a way that the deck tries to win.
Well, I know it's got like that 1-drop blue spell that's like you draw a card, each opponent gets a poison counter or something like that.
No, the way that it wants to win is dropping a Blighted Agent or a Glistening Elf on the board early, and then hitting it with a Mutagenic Growth and a Scale Up on the next turn.
Well, yeah, I know that one also, but there was another one where it was like trying to get them with all of those cards that came out in All Will Be One that have the infect on them.
So there was a deck like that in Pioneer, ran by exactly 1 person, and he's sitting at the table.
Yeah, and that was me. And you know how that went? It went awfully, because they're just bad.
Honestly, I might just be remembering your Pioneer deck.
That's exactly what's happening right now, is you're remembering a Pioneer deck.
And so, like, those cards aren't... They're, number one, they're really bad for many reasons. But there's just no real good way to deal with it, like, unless you start playing, like, Questing Beast.
But what does he do?
Gideon, God damn it. Gideon Wells says, it makes me curious, what would be the worst kind of deck to be the only type in at a tournament? Storm. Storm. So, if every deck in the tournament is Storm, then every game is a non-interactive game. The players are literally shooting past each other 100% of the time. There's an interactive game to be had in Scales, in Domain, in Tron, but Storm, uniquely, is a non-interactive deck. So I think that would probably be the worst one to have a critical mass of at a tournament.
Even if there were two like Azorius control or Jeskai control decks that are just sit there passing the turn and glaring at each other, even that would have more interaction, because at some point someone twitches their eyebrow and then like the Cold War erupts.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like for Pioneer at least, Gale and I had that experience of let's both play control decks against each other in Pioneer and land pass until one of us decides to blink.
Yeah. It's kind of fun playing those games. I'm not gonna lie. You don't want to do it like every game. It gets old, but like every so often, just sit there, just have like it's like in the old Pokemon anime, the first season when his
The Metapods.
Yeah, when his Metapod fought the other Metapod, and they just have a harden off.
Yep. Yeah, well, when Ash forgets that Metapod doesn't forget tackle when it's level 7.
The other trainer seemed to forget it as well.
Well, so the other trainer was... I'm going to go ahead and headcanon it as the other trainer was an NPC, so he probably had the level 4 Metapod that didn't have tackle.
No, he caught the Metapod.
He caught the level 4 Metapod.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it never learned tackle.
Jesus Christ.
That's how we're going to do it. Remember, in Pokemon Yellow, you can catch a Pidgeotto at level 7, which is not normal, but it is for Pokemon Yellow for reasons. I don't know. I want Modern to be healthy. I want Modern to be affordable, and I'm glad that at least a couple steps have been taken to get us a little closer to that ideal, but we're not there yet. We're nowhere near there. There's a friend of ours that I let borrow my my affinity deck, but I had to take out the Urza Sagas and the Shadow Spear that were in it in order to put in like cranial rams and stuff, because I didn't have an extra 4 set of Urza's Saga to lend out. Like, the reason I have 2 Modern decks is one of the most expensive parts of my Modern deck I clone between the 2 decks. So
I think I've got a spare Shadow Spear too, if you need it.
the problem is the spare Shadow Spear does nothing without the 4 Urza Sagas.
Oh.
Like, it's literally there so that you can go, do I need the Springleaf Drum or the Pithing Needle or the Shadow Spear today? Or the Soul Guide Lantern.
I've never owned a single copy of Urza Saga because I've never ran it. I'm sure it's a good land, but because I've always been outside looking in, I'm just like, oh, that's that thing that everyone freaks out about and has a really high price tag. Anywho.
I mean, also, like, the deck you play in Modern just has no reason to run one.
Well, not even just Modern, just like Commander and stuff. Like, because I've got God knows how many Commander decks and stuff. I've never had a copy of Urza Saga.
Jessa says, would Inkeeper's talent be a good add-in scales? No.
No, it's not good enough.
It's too slow.
That and new enchantment, ain't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the pseudo doubling season. So the thing with scales benefits absolutely zero from any of the higher cost, like doubling season-esque effects, because by the time they drop one of those down, they've already vomited their hand on the board. They gain nothing. What Scales wants to do is see like Ozilith Shattered Spire or Hardened Scales come down incredibly early and then manipulate that +1, because that +1 acts almost as a pseudo doubler, because all the instances of adding counters in Hardened Scales, except when a thing dies, are almost always instances of one counter moving from one end of the board to the other. So the Hardened Scales is effectively a doubling season for the deck at that point.
Inkeeper's talent pulled up here in front of me. At its base level, it's just trash for the deck. Level 2, it would be good, where you pay the 1 extra green pip to give your permanents with counters on them Ward 1. That would be really good. But by that point, you've now invested 2 green pips and a colorless to get to this point. And you've also leveled up at sorcery speed, meaning that, you sink the mana into casting it, it resolves, and then you go to level it up, and then someone abrades it or something.
Yeah.
I mean, not abrade, but like a...
So, like, the perfect scenario for Innkeeper's talent is turn 1, Zabaz. Turn 2, Innkeeper's Talent, add 1 counter on Zabaz. Turn 3, play an Arcbound Ravager or only Arcbound Ravager or a Walking Ballista, and then level up the Innkeeper's Talent. The problem is that at level 2, we have Patchwork Automaton.
Mm-hmm.
And Patchwork Automaton on turn 2 is a far more disruptive thing for the opponent. It has
Very
the ward.
good.
What's up?
No, I'm saying it's very good.
Yeah, the Automaton has Ward 2 built in, and the Automaton wants to see your preceding cards. Innkeeper's Talent wants you to have an established board to add the counters to before you hit level 3, but you'll never hit level 3. You'll die before then in Modern.
Mm-hmm.
Automaton wants to come down on his own and then see other cards hit. Like, the ideal for Scales is turn 1 Hardened Scales, turn 2 Patchwork Automaton, turn 3 swing the Automaton at you for like 1 billion. Like, that's what it wants to do. It wants to drop down Welding Jars, or in some cases, in Bimini, you've seen me do this just to get damage in. I'll just throw Walking Ballistas and Hangerback Walkers down for 0.
I've seen that too.
Yeah, just to
I've been on the receiving end of that, actually.
just to get the damage high enough for a lethal hit. Like,
I do pseudo evoke in plenty of decks. It's all my commander decks, but like my Rayami deck, right?
yeah,
I've got Gold Vein Hydra in there, and you can be sure that bitch only ever gets cast for 1 green pip.
yep. Like, I will vomit my hand down to 0 just to get the Automaton big enough to kill you before you get cards.
Now, on Innkeeper's Talent, when you level it up, does leveling up put some kind of a counter to denote the leveling?
No.
No.
That would make this a better card. If classes got a level counter,
Like
on
the level up.
do what?
Like the level up cards.
Which
The level up creatures.
Yeah, the level
Oh
up
yeah,
cards
yeah,
on
like the level up
emojis,
creatures.
yeah.
Yeah. Like if
The
the
yeah.
classes when you did it, it put a level up counter on it or whatever. That would make them so much better of cards.
Yeah.
Just across the whole of all classes.
Yeah, so Innkeeper's Talent, Jessa says, think Innkeeper's Talent will be in any modern Infect deck? No, it won't. Because again, Infect wants to kill you on turn 2. Infect wants you dead on turn 2. The turn you would be casting the Innkeeper's Talent, the Infect deck wants you to hit 10 Infect counters instantly.
Yeah, those 2 CMC at the top end Keeper's Talent could instead be getting you like +8 or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jessa says you could proliferate. You can proliferate, but it's not going to do anything for Innkeeper's Talent.
Josh was talking about if you could proliferate the level up counters I was talking about.
Oh, yeah, you would be able to proliferate those if they were...
That's the whole thing. That was the
Yeah,
whole...
you'd be able to proliferate it, but then also cards like Innkeeper's Talent would protect itself. Like, it would just be...
Because it would have a counter.
Nutty card. Yep. It'd be a nutty card.
As it stands, it's a $20 7-mana doubling season.
Oh, no, it's still a really good card.
It's a good card in Standard and Pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or even, honestly, even Commander. Even Commander.
I think Commander is probably where it shines the brightest, though. Because, like, in Commander, you have the time to get an Innkeeper's Talent online.
You have the time to get it online. You have so much ability to spread counters out like Oprah with the cars. So everything's got counters. Everything's got ward. You're in green, so you've got mana for days. Like, it's... I've seen people run Innkeeper's Talent in Commander, and it's really good.
Fun fact about the Oprah with the cars thing, she actually screwed over everybody in the audience.
I heard about that.
Yeah, turns out giving everybody free cars means that they were applicable for the gift tax, which was at the time $7,000.
Yeah.
And they specifically chose only people for the audience who were in need of a car, so people who were in a poverty situation, so people who couldn't afford the tax.
Yeah, and then what's even worse is because they had already taken the car. Then it was, I can't remember if it counted. They had to repo the car or something.
The car would either get repossessed, or they had to find somebody willing to buy the car at market value, not at the used car market value, to make up the cost and then buy a shitty car. That's
Yeah, at least a few people got the card legit repossessed, which now meant they had a repo on their history.
like when we bring up that situation, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth now that I know more about it.
Yeah, no, that was her team did not. Her team did not research that one very well.
Yeah, they should have been responsible for the taxes on it too, so that people actually got a free car. Because if I say here's a free car, it costs you $7,000. That's not a free car. That's just not a free car.
I mean, what they could have done, it's the way that families usually pass cars to their kids or whatever. You sell it to them for a singular dollar. You don't give it to them. You sell it to them for $1 cash.
Yep. That said, I think we've gotten most of the bans stuff out of our system. I think we can now talk about the article about Nadu that came out. You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, then we are going to flit over to that from Michael Majors on banning Nadu Winged Wisdom in Modern. He says, as the lead designer of Modern Horizons 3, I wanted to weigh in on our decision today. Nadu Winged Wisdom was a design mistake. The community quickly identified in preview season that the combination of Shuko, or Outrider and Core, which Gale mentioned, with Nadu could allow a player to draw their entire library. As one would expect, many early lists were untuned, being either too fragile or using Nadu more as an afterthought than a primary game plan. Before Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3, Nadu was clearly too strong. It was a clearly strong deck, but hadn't quite shown itself as bannable. I'm just going to go ahead and say I disagree with that already. Like, that was when it was making up 22% of the meta, right? When we first started talking about Nadu?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Once the deck's making up 22% of the meta before the Pro Tour, that if it's making up that much of the meta, that's enough of a reason. Like, you're starting to inch into Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta tiers of garbage. Anyway, as we know, the Pro Tour changed that. The best players in the world had the incentive to tune the deck for the highest possible upside, and they delivered. They removed Thassa's Oracle from the deck and figured out how to handle any situation through a convoluted Endurance and Springheart Nantuko loop that could effectively give Nadu players infinite mana and the means to fight through any situation, including interaction and battlefield sweepers. This loop also required demonstrating a complicated series of game actions with a high number of permanents changing zones that resulted in extremely long turns. The deck was beautifully built and a logistical nightmare. The deck dominated the tournament with a 59% win rate, and Simon Nielsen claimed the Pro Tour trophy. Since then, it has performed worse. Some of this can be attributed to the fact that the deck is objectively weaker in online formats. Many players still resort to using Thassa's Oracle, a weak card outside of the combo once they've drawn their entire deck due to the Endurance loop being unrealistic under an online timer. This makes the decks more vulnerable to mulligans and weaker to interaction. Despite that, it continued to be a prevalent part of the winner's metagame on Magic Online and is threatening to put up an incredible number at RCQs. Removing another combination card like Shuko or Outrider and Core wouldn't solve the logistical problem that Nadu presents. Even at weaker win rates, Nadu leveraging Lightning Greaves or similar cards could be problematic for the long-term enjoyment of tournaments, since it threatens to monopolize people's time, all while not being fun or an easy deck to interact with. There isn't a compelling argument to preserve the deck. For these reasons, Nadu Winged Wisdom is banned. So we're going to pause there. There's more in the article that goes into the design process of Nadu, which we'll get into here in a second. But I do want to ask, Biminem, what are your thoughts on what was presented so far there?
Like 59%. Are they saying that of all the decks that won, period, 59% were
No. So
Nadu, this one guy had a 59%.
No.
So Nadu decks
did,
had a 59% win rate.
Yeah.
Okay, so they won 6 out of 10 games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only games that they lost were games that they were going second twice. Those are the only games they actually managed to lose generally.
Yeah. My takeaway on it is that it's the right thing to ban Nadu, because they even mention in the text here there were too many different cards that interacts with.
Yep.
Like it was because people were worried. I mean, I guess not worried, but there was chatter about potentially just banning the Shuko, and then some people
The
responded,
lightning greaves would come in.
Why, if the kid with the Legos in the middle of the living room is the problem, why would you ban one type of his Legos when you can ban the kid? Like it's
just get rid of the kid.
Yeah, like it's because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards called out by the designers at Wizards. 7 cards were called out as being problematic with Nadu.
Yep. And
one of them being a CEDH famous win con.
And that CEDH famous win con was considered the weakest part of the deck.
It was. That
is the weakest part.
Nadu straight up hit that Knuckles. I don't need your power.
Like, I remember when the Pro Tour conversations were happening, and everybody basically said, "Hey, the Thassa's Oracle version of the deck is the Training Wheels version. The real version of the deck does insert this loop here."
But my headcanon, the reason that the Thassa's Oracle thing was a capacity at all, the advent of Nadu coming to the game brought a lot of CEDH players to Modern, because there was also talk about it being a CEDH commander. So a lot of CEDH commanders players looked at it and went, "Oh, okay, here's Nadu. This is a card. I'm going to build a deck that uses him in Modern. I need a way to win. What's that card that I used to win in all my CEDH decks? Ah, cool, that fits here. Shove it in." So I bet that's why we saw the Thassa's Oracle, was because there was a CEDH following behind Nadu, and CEDH players playing Modern because of Nadu.
Well, Thassa's does also have a history of 60 card play, right? So during Standard, Thassa's actually was a known win con when it was in Standard. So there is previous expectation for Thassa's to perform. But before we go on with the article, Gail, what are your takeaways from here? Anything new?
I find it really funny. Because as a person who did not want to buy Shukos, I just play Lightning Greaves. And I was like, if I play Lightning Greaves, and I just play, I don't have to play Urgent Saga, because Urgent Saga we usually when I got Shuko. And so it just ended up in a whole different build. And I was like, well, I ended up in Collected Company, and I'm just like, man, this is just dumb.
So, and basically it came down to, there were other ways to build the deck that were also stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
All the versions are dumb. But
and that's kind of how this article is reading. It's like, oh, this didn't work, do the other way. Oh, this didn't work, do the other way.
But I think what I find interesting is there was actually, and this is where we get into some of the problems with Shuko's design. Did you see what the original version of Shuko was? Or the original version of Nadu was?
I did.
So, for those who are audio only...
Scroll down a little bit, yeah.
Yep. The original Nadu Winged Wisdom was 1 green and blue, legendary bird, 3/4, flyer. You may cast permanent spells as though they had flash. Okay, cool. We're basically on the same track right now, except for that flash part. Like, that's interesting that it was a what was that? What's that mirror? It's not silver mirror.
Shimmering mirror.
Shimmering mirror. It's a shimmering mirror. Like, that's interesting already. Okay. Then it
Someone
says
involved in the design team of Prophet of Crewfix was still salty about the ban.
Yeah.
whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. Okay, cool. So the original version of this was a reverse Risen Reef in every way, shape, and form. That's fine. That's interesting. That's a fun idea. A reverse
I would love that as a commander,
like a reverse Risen Reef that lets you play Simic on instant speed. That's fun.
But only if other people target you.
Well, no, you always get the Simic. You always get the Simic at instant speed. That was the thing that he always gets to do. Cast permanent spells as though they had flash. He has that all the time.
No, sorry, I was talking about the trigger.
Yeah, the advantage engine being built on hey, like I would be willing to build a Nadu deck right now based on the original Nadu design. Because that seems so much more interesting to me than what we actually got. But in the actual article, it says, Nadu was a powerful option against interaction and a part of various Bant mid-range strategies throughout our testing, but it wasn't something that our group perceived as much more than a role player. For some more context, Modern Horizon testings works differently than standard FFL, Future League. For both Modern Horizons 2 and 3, we brought in a small group of contractors and worked on the set as in a dedicated sprint as a collaboration between that group and a small number of play designers. The play testing time is more dense and the group is singularly focused on the set without any other responsibilities, but it is shorter in terms of weeks. After the playtesting, there were a series of last-minute checks on the set by various groups. I like how they're not named here. This is the normal operating procedure for every release. It is a series of opportunities for folks from various departments and discipline, see the marketing department probably, to weigh in on every component of the project and give final feedback. In one of these meetings, there was a great deal of concern raised by Nadu's flash granting ability for commander play. Fuck! Why? Why? Why are we here again? This is a modern set. Fuck commander.
That one sentence alone.
Who gives a flying fuck? It's a casual format. It's okay. Dumb shit enters it all the time.
But literally, it would have been fine in Commander. In that printing,
we have flash granting abilities and tons of shit in Commander already.
What, you mean how Liberator says my deck has flash?
We have Liberator. We have fucking anyway. After removing the ability, it wasn't clear that the card would have an audience or a home, something that is important for every card we make. No, it's not. Chaff is an important part of draft environments. It's okay for some cards to not have homes. Anyway, ultimately, my intention was to create a build around aimed at commander play, which resulted in the final text. Sidebar, please stop making build around commanders. I beg of you. Please. For those who don't know, a build around commander is a commander that, I mean, it kind of explains itself, right? It's a commander that sits as the signpost of your deck, and everything has to work with what the commander does. I don't want more build around commanders. I want commanders that supplement a good deck strategy, but are not necessary for the deck to function. Like that's what I want more of.
The easiest type of commander to punish. One Counterless Transformation, one Song of the Dryads, one Imprison in the Moon on that build around commander, and you now have a stack of dirtle.
Deck just folds.
Yeah.
It says, it goes on saying, I missed the interaction with 0 mana abilities that are so problematic. Okay, hold on. I have to ask, how, when you're looking at building around for commander, did you miss Lightning Greaves? How? I don't understand how you get to that world where one of the most prolific cards in the entire format slips under your nose. That feels strange to me. But the last round of folks who were shown the card in the building missed it too. We also didn't play test it, as we were far along in the process and it shipped as is. I want to go over some talking points and learnings, but before I do, I'll emphasize that despite the failings of the process, ultimately the card was my responsibility as the designer of the set. So, again, before we go any further, thoughts from the peanut gallery on...
I'm loving reading this. I'm sorry.
It's just funnier every time I look at it. Like I took a cursory glance at it, but I wanted to give my full reaction on the podcast, and man, did it not disappoint.
Every sentence. Okay, starting with the 4th paragraph where he said in one of the meetings, it was a great deal of concern raised by flash granting ability for commander play. Starting at that sentence down.
Everything is wrong.
No, every single sentence contradicts every other sentence from the end. All 3 paragraphs. Read it, y'all can check me on this. All three of the bottom three paragraphs right there. Every single sentence contradicts every single other sentence.
It's just, it feels so weird, right? It feels very strange reading this article and knowing about all of the stuff that happened with Nadu, because it begins. It begins with, what about Commander players? And it ends with, we didn't play test it.
I love it.
Oh God, it makes me want to scream. It makes me want to scream so hard. I do not understand why any of that happened.
It goes back to a construction joke. That Nadu was made on a Friday at 5 p.m.
Oh yeah.
Jesus Christ.
This has been a trip.
It's an experience, right? It's an experience. And
it's kind of like when you read I don't really follow like streamers or new age public figures, but like when they fuck up and then they get called out on it and then they release some statement where they're like, hey, I'm sorry, this, that, whatever, and they trip over themselves and they try to cover ass and it's just hilarious and they're pathetic.
Yeah,
it feels like reading one of those.
I feel like I'm reading the Doctor Disrespect. Psych! I didn't actually talk to those miners. Statement all over again.
Yeah, I didn't want to make the obvious joke of what happens when a content creator fucks up and the most common way they seem to fuck up. I didn't want to make the joke. I'm glad you did. Jesus. This whole...
Small indie company, guys. Small indie company.
This all could have been avoided if only Wizards had play tested. You know, like most normal companies would here. I understand that he's taking a lot of the flack himself, and I can respect that. But this is not just a him problem. This is not. I'm not going to lay all of this on his back. I don't think that would be fair. I think the majority of this doesn't come down to the singular designer. I think more of this comes down to the process, right? Also, just so y'all can see, just so y'all are aware, in reverence for our fallen comrade, we all have a piece of Nadu's background behind us now. In reverence for our fallen bird friend. But I cannot throw all this at the designer. I throw all of this at the feet of a company who has deadlines that get shorter and shorter for designers. I respect a designer that is willing to put all of that on himself. I respect that. But I can't in good conscience blame him when the design process is, we used fewer weeks and more people, and so more shit went wrong. That always happens when you increase the amount of people looking at a project, making a project. There's more variables, and now you've decreased the amount of time the project is being designed. Like, that is a guaranteed thing to happen every single time. I can't in good conscience blame him.
Hasbro looked at the last time one of their facilities was being built and saw a ton of bodies on site and went, more hands, faster production. And then thought, hey, that's not going to be a problem with designing IP, right? All right, bet.
Yep. Hey, so, you know, I throw this at the hands of WotC Corporate. I throw this at the hands of Hasbro Corporate. I don't throw this at the hands of the individual designers specifically. Because while I can rant and rave about how did you not see one of the most prolific cards in all of Commander when designing this card, I can also say you shouldn't have had to think about that. You shouldn't have had to think about Commander when designing this card. You also should have had the time to consider it. You should have had the time for people to be on board to help you consider the card. You should have had time to play test it.
They should have literally had someone delegated to break the card. Someone whose job it was, kind of like when they hire the hackers to try to test the security system, try to hack into the thing. They should have had someone literally to sit there and go, all right, let me break this card. Let me find the most degenerate bullshit function.
That's what you're
abuse this
supposed to
card.
do in
Yes,
game testing.
Stress testing it. They should have had a stress tester to try to break the function of the card.
Like when I've seen people have the opinion on bans and stuff that you shouldn't ban cards. You should just release stuff that should be able to deal with it. And unfortunately, the person who said that was a good friend of mine. So I'm saying this not as a like fart in the wind thing. This is a disagreement I had with him and a disagreement I'm having here, voicing publicly. I believe that it is naive to think that game designers never make mistakes, and a ban list exists to account for those mistakes. It's okay for mistakes to be made as long as they are accounted for and handled. Maybe my mentality is because I came from Yu-Gi-Oh, where like cards got banned all the time for the dumbest of reasons, but I don't know. I don't feel the sting of bans as much as other Magic players seem to feel.
So as you know, I got hit heavy by the Fury ban in my domain deck. And you gotta think, this is also back before Leyline of the Guild Pact was even out. So domain took a literal dip before, coming back out above it because of Leyline. So I got hit heavy by the Fury ban. I didn't care, and I actually enjoyed finding my own little homebrew replacement card with Cinderclasm. And you've actually seen in the tournament, Cinderclasm has worked extremely well for me.
I saw you make a player quit with it.
Yeah. The player straight up dropped the tournament because I Cinderclasmed his elf deck. Like, I enjoyed that ban. It made me think outside the box. Because the community wasn't like, all right, guys, Fury's out. Here is card that is 98% as effective as Fury. We're all going to use that. Everyone was like, fuck, Fury's banned. What are we going to do? And I dug into my box of bulk and found the shining little thing with like a spot of ketchup sitting on it. And I was like, bet.
Nope. Continuing on with the article, it says the scope of risk. A lot of early buzz surrounded Nadu included comments like, why does it have 4 toughness? If it only triggered once, it would be okay. And the most extreme being, did they put the quotations on the card in the wrong place? As I've already gone over, the most obvious answer to things typically is the right one. Nadu was not an attempt to push a card right up to the perceived maximum power level and missing the mark. If I had grasped the scope of the risk here, I would have changed the text box entirely and not hoped that trimming a toughness would land us in the perfect spot. However, much of managing Modern Horizons sets is walking through the tightrope of risk. Ugin's Labyrinth and Chthonian Nightmare are examples of cards we shipped with eyes wide open. There was a chance of those cards going wrong, but they are things we deemed worth doing to inject power and excitement into both lapsed and brand new decks. As a concrete example of something we changed, Amped Raptor had a much more Cascade-like ability early in development. This resulted in a lot of Glimpse of Tomorrows being cast. The deck wasn't too strong, but the combo turns took forever, and the deck wasn't very enjoyable. We even failed to patch out a few times by changing Amp Raptor in various ways, but ultimately we had to design a card to what it was now to avoid as many shenanigans as possible. The benefits of creating this new Glimpse deck didn't make up for how unenjoyable the play patterns were. Many more cards in Modern Horizons 3 are open-ended build-arounds to try to not be obvious with how to use them. We put them through their paces as a group. In most cases, didn't conclude how to optimize them. To me, Magic is the most fun when it presents a puzzle for people to experiment with and debate. So right, you missed it, and clearly there's a desire to take risks, so what does that mean moving forward? So before we get into the final part of the article, the moving forward section, I do want to address, and of course give Gale and Bimbenham their chances to address this as well. Amped Raptor has its own issues right now. The buzz around the community around Amped Raptor is not so much the Raptor itself. The Raptor, I think, is designed fine, but energy has never been designed fine. Energy's always been one of those mechanics that is very hard to interact with and can be very unfun for a lot of players. I personally like energy a lot. I think it's a very fun mechanic, but I think there should be more ways to handle energy than just kill them before they get too much. Amped Raptor and Galvanic Discharge being the most important parts of that strategy right now. I want to give the deck a try and play it myself to see how I feel about it, but I haven't played against it. What I have seen, there was a lot of chatter about how much the deck is going to dominate the format right now. We'll see how things shake out, but I'm going to yield the floor after that.
I feel like energy is a thing that has gotten on the top end of allowable support recently. It used to just not have any support, right? Energy was just trash, but only because it didn't have any support. They've given it so much support lately that it's teetering on being too strong. Because energy, you remember gold tokens?
Specifically for Modern, right? I'm assuming.
Well, just in general, and just in the theory of how it works.
No,
no.
In the history of Magic.
Standard.
In Standard, in the history of Magic, energy was one of the strongest decks around, period.
Well, I mean, like in current play, not like in Standard.
That's why I'm saying in Modern specifically, because, like, if we're talking about historically, energy had its time being, like, the talked about problem.
Right. But that's Standard of the past. I'm talking about, I mean, any format but that's played in 2024.
Okay.
Because with energy, gold tokens were decided to be too strong from a design concept, so they stopped making gold tokens. And all it was a treasure that didn't have to tap. That was it. And they stopped making gold tokens. Imagine a resource, a mana that has functions outside of just being mana. That like it can do all kinds of things that get access to it, that sits on you as a player, so you cannot wipe it from a board. It does not go away with phases ending or anything like that, and it just gets more broken the more you can stack it up.
Mm-hmm.
From the base concept of what energy could be, it has an astronomical ceiling if they keep putting more support for energy. I think we're at a good spot with energy right now, like in terms of the game as a whole. I think we're at a good spot with energy now. I don't think we need any more energy cards printed.
I think that energy cards are a bad design space that I also happen to like in general, but not because energy is busted, because counters on players as a concept is busted.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking with my comment is that the issue with energy is less of any of the cards around energy, and the fact that the only card legal in formats that play energy to deal with it is Solemnity. That's it. That's the only card you have that can interact with energy.
And it does nothing to somebody who already has the counters.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm saying with energy and stuff. That like its ceiling is so high because there's nil answers to it. And it's so omni-usable because it sits on you and it stays through all the phases of the game.
Yeah, it's one of those design spaces that we finally got something to remove counters from players with Final Act, but not enough to deal with, say, Infect, right? There's not many ways to deal with Infect counters yet. If we have a few more ways that we could sideboard in counters on player removal, then I think that the design space for energy could be amped up a little bit.
Hey, hold on. Stop it.
You don't want infinite experience counters being a thing anymore?
No. Final Act is not Modern legal.
Correct. So I'm saying they need to make more cards like Final Act.
They need to make at least, because like you say, the only card we have is Final Act, and we don't even have Final Act.
Yeah, we don't have Final Act in 60 card. You're right. We have Final Act in Commander.
And like energy in Commander, I feel like it's fine in the sense that it's a thing that you have to deal. It's the thing that you deal with because it's not generically like broken. So it's kind of fine. But
in Commander, energy is more of just a fun dirtle engine for most people.
Exactly. But the fact that there is no in Modern where energy is a really good deck right now, and you have no way of interacting with it. You just have none. You literally just sit there and you look at your opponent and you're like, I have 20 energy. I'm going to spend all of it, and you can't do anything about it.
And at that point, they go, here's the Amped Raptor. Now it just is Cascade.
Yeah.
It just
Well, so the changes that they made to Amped Raptor to make it not Cascade is they made it so that the exiled cards stay exiled.
yeah.
That's it. And so that's what they did. That's the change that they did, which I find really actually like a good change and like a nice way to make it not cast Glimpse of Tomorrows.
It's
Yeah.
also a pretty good balancing with the color. It's more in lines with Red's true impulse drawing kind of theory.
Mhm.
You either use it now or it's gone.
What's funny,
Yeah.
JDX brings up now we could only ban about 20 more cards from Standard to begin to fix it. What cards from Standard would you want to ban? Because the buzz around Standard that I've been hearing from basically everyone is this is the most fun Standard has been in like a decade. Like, the Standard format that exists right now is almost unilaterally praised for how diverse the format is and how fun the format is. So I don't know where that comment is coming from.
Yeah, I think that I have to be fair, I haven't been keeping up with Standard a lot, so I don't really have an opinion there, but I haven't heard of any cards being an issue after like besides Shieldred the Apocalypse, but we don't talk about that card.
JDX says that's not really a hard thing to pass when the bar is so low. Okay, cool. That's a non-answer. I understand now. I'm not getting an answer there. We're going to continue. Into the part about what they learned for going forward. This is both a design and a logistical failure. That is something we're trying to tackle in a variety of ways. The ban and restriction announcement timing is changing to be optimized for RCQs and widespread competitive play going forward. While we can't guarantee to avoid bans, will avoid bans in the future, we can take steps to make sure that they will do as little damage as possible for players who want to invest their time and energy into competitive formats. On the inside, it's a combination of things. One, at a high level, we want to make sure that all relevant groups have timed impact change in a window that makes sense for the project. So no banning something within like a week of a major tournament is what that kind of boils down to.
Well, they'll try not to they'll try not to. If there's a card that's super egregious, they will still.
Yeah. Also, to respond to JDX again very quickly, saying it is an answer. No, it's not. The definition of a non-answer is an answer that can be given, that can be considered a valid answer to a question, but does not give any information and does not yield a position one way or another. That is what you did.
It also doesn't answer the question because you entered what cards.
Yeah, there were two questions in the compound question, which is what cards would you have banned, because the format as right now seems to be very healthy by player consensus. Anyway, I'll continue with the article, but I did want to address that because some people don't actually know what a non-answer is. Basically everything black, so let's just ban a color out of Magic. Again, it's not an answer. That is again a non-answer. Like, that is an answer that is given and is so vague so as not to convey anything and does not yield a position. It's a non-answer again. Anyway, I have faith that the current Nadu has been scrutinized while our contractors were actively playtesting things. If it had been scrutinized more while our contractors were actively playtesting, things would have turned out better. 2, I'll be putting more effort into being conservative if I can't draw clear conclusions, as well as encouraging that behavior in others. I didn't know that Shuko was powerful with Nadu. However, I am aware that I didn't fully understand the implications of Nadu's text box. That should have urged me to be more aggressive and seek other opinions, and failing any strong conclusions, to default to something I better understood. I was blinded by a goal. Make something that's really awesome for somebody. Ultimately, nobody was happy. I'll conclude by stressing the point that Magic is a game of enormous complexity. We won't get things right all the time or always be able to predict how our formats respond. However, the creation of this game is a labor of love, and so in these situations that fall on the side of clear mistakes with clear solutions, we take them very seriously and are always looking to improve the way we make the game. So the takeaway I get from that personally is there's a common problem-solving technique when you have 10 people who agree on something. You find somebody whose job it is to be the one person disagreeing.
Devil's advocate.
Yeah, your job is to find someone. And if somebody who agrees with you is in the room, your job is to get them to make a convincing argument against your idea. Because sometimes it'll turn out that they don't actually have a good point even when they try their best, and so you continue on. But oftentimes they'll be able to poke holes in your design, and you'll be able to realize, oh, there's a problem here. There's a problem in the design process, a problem in the production. There's a problem somewhere in the pipeline that needs to be addressed, which in this case would have been just, let's revert the card to what it originally was. We recognize there was a previous problem that was seen, but the problem was a problem for Commander, not a problem for the actual deck. It's like not a problem for the format the cards are being made for, right? But that's my thought there. Like, I'm happy that he's okay saying, hey, we needed more devil's advocates dealing with our stuff going forward. But I think there's more stuff that's not being said in the article, like how part of the design process was to get something out faster. And I feel like it would be easier to, I don't know, give the devs more time to cook.
So it's like, so I'm just going to say, I'm not surprised that something like Nadu happened, because I think besides the fact that Nadu is obviously broken when you look at it, I can see, like, besides if they like, this kind of thing happens in Yu-Gi-Oh all the time, because Yu-Gi-Oh is in internal format. You're not going to test it with every single card. You're not going to remember every single card.
Yeah.
So having these kind of things are I'm not surprised that it happened. What I'm surprised with I can see a lot of issues that were had, where in the entire article they talk about how they made a last minute change, and we all know what happened with last minute changes. We get Skull Clamp.
Yeah, Skull Clamp had to be banned out of what was it back then, Type 1?
It had to be banned.
It had to be banned in Type 2.
Type
right.
2.
Which was what now turned into Standard. Real quick, again, doing an address to the audience, JDX says, to add to the black thing, I'm talking about Liliana and Obliterator, not to mention Sheoldred, and also the Super Manland control BS needs to be nerfed as well. It doesn't matter how diverse it is. Manland control, is that even a deck in Standard anymore? Like,
I'm not sure, but hey, it's an answer to the question.
It is an answer to the question, and I am willing to say I'm happy that you answered the question. I don't think that the final part where you said, since you needed common sense explained, apparently, I can explain common sense to you if you would like. Common sense is the set of biases that you have accumulated up until this exact moment. Common sense is a stupid phrase, as it doesn't actually explain anything. Everybody's version of common sense is very different. As for the actual answer, as a mid-range player, I can understand the wanting things like Liliana and Phyrexian Obliterator taken out. At the same time, looking at what's available in the meta right now, they also don't seem to be showcasing any amount of prevalence in the meta. So I'm not sure which version of Standard you're playing where those are as big of a problem, but I do respect that there at least was an answer given. JDX says, well, at least you're halfway right. Clearly, common sense isn't common anymore, as we see here. Okay, cool. So if we're just doing that, there's a super easy solution to that one. Super simple. I can just hover my hand over this and do what happens to all children. They get put into timeout. 24 hours. Have fun. Anyway, continue.
But I think that last minute changes on cards, very dangerous. And I think that groups other than play designers giving strong input on cards still very not what I really want to see, because play designers are there specifically to design how the game plays, and if you have some other people like the storyboard people come in and be like, "Hey, I want to play this on my commander deck," and I don't want to play against it. We
Yeah.
have issues.
I'm also worried that like there's an amount of people that are part of that conversation that are part of the marketing departments where they're like, hey, we need this product to be pushed, so we need this card to be a little more powerful to sell more packs. Like I know that it says specifically in the article that, oh, that's definitely not what happened, but like I don't trust corporations. I just don't. But Biminin, what's your takeaway on this for the conclusion there?
He's gone.
He's gone. He's dead. Huh.
I'll conclude. It's just in the point.
Oh, he's reading. Okay.
No. We read it. It's just I had to refresh my mind because I had a thought back a minute ago. I know that the devs are infinitely better at the jobs than I would be, even if you gave me a year crash course to catch up to their spot. Because I mean, ask me to design 15 cards. I'll design 15 broken cards because I won't know that I'm creating some interaction with some obscure card out there in the nether. It's the law of numbers with Magic. As it grows, the chances of you making broken interactions with new cards becomes infinitely higher. You both have to make functionally unique cards, which becomes harder and harder with every new set. You have to find yet further horizons to print a card that haven't been done before, which is harder the more quantity there are, and then also makes interacting with the cards that have previously been printed that much more likely to occur. So when it comes to problematic designs of cards and the complexity like they talk about, I completely see that. Yeah, I'm like you. I don't fault the designers in any capacity. I think it's ridiculous of Wizards and Hasbro to put the designers under such a fire design and not even have stress testers in place. It shouldn't even be on the designers to have to schedule their own stress testing. The Wizards should literally say, hey, you guys, sit in a think tank, design cards. Give us your rough draft. Then Wizards takes the rough draft, gives it to stress testers. That way you don't have overlapping influence from one party to the other. The stress testers are as virgin as getting players, pulling them from packs. And then the stress testers try to break it without any kind of design knowledge. They give their feedback, and then it goes back. You ping pong it back and forth maybe 2-3 times, and then it's fine.
Yeah, it's a... The thing is, that process alone, to get the amount of data that's required there, is going to be a several-month-long process. And it's even noted here that like the Horizon sets are designed with a shorter time window, which is really strange to me because they're also larger sets.
They're some of the most impactful sets Wizards prints. Just in general, in period. Like, we got Spring Heart and Nantuko, we got Basking Brood Scale, we got Sowing Microspawn, we got... And I just listed green cards. I just said green cards. Like, we got a ton of good cards. We got all the flares. Like, we got the new MDFCs, which I'm running in my Modern deck right now because I get to run lands that also protect my my artifacts now. Yeah, they got the new shock lands, for Christ's sake. Like, they print more power in any of the Horizon sets than they do the other ones. They very clearly seem to have a ceiling with the other sets where it's like, okay, we're not going to print anything super powerful except for like 1 or 2 cards, like Shield Through the Apocalypse, that type of thing. With Horizons, they're like, all right, let's all bump some lines.
Yeah, it's just kind of nutty. But I think where I'm at, I think we're all kind of in agreement. We don't really fault the designers here. We do recognize that the design process is hampered by corporate. And while Michael doesn't say directly in the article, oh, it's corporate's fault, he's never going to say that it's corporate's fault because it's not a good idea. It's
very obviously written between the lines, though, very clearly.
That all said, I think that's really all we have to talk about today when it comes to the ban announcement. I can't think of any more that comes to mind before we wrap up and head up to tacos, right?
Yeah, no, I've said my piece to it. Like,
that's it.
Yep. Well, With that said, thank you all for coming out. I appreciate every single one of you coming out and watching the show. Apologies that content has been a little more sparse lately. I've been reshuffling my schedule a bit, and it's been kind of hard to adjust. So I'm getting back on that treadmill, though. That all said, thank you for coming out. Thank you, Gale and Biminum, for coming out as well. And I will see you all at tacos.
Yep.